So the Underwater Menace isn't good. I know coming right out and saying that is bold, but it's true. It's one of the weakest serials of the Troughton era, and probably my least favourite of his era. Although I know there's one serial at the end of his run which I've only watched once, which will probably take this serial's place when I get to it. So this is Jamie's first trip in the TARDIS, and if you remember from my previous review, his introduction was very last minute. Because of this, the next few scripts had to be hastily rewritten to include him. Now I do think that the Underwater Menace does get away with this, for the most part, which is something I can say in its favour, but I think there are bigger script problems which come up in episodes 2 and 3. So when the serial is set is a bit vague, with being at some point after the 1968 Olympics due to the bracelet that Polly finds early on, although when it is set, it doesn't have much, if any, impact on the plot. While yes, we do meet several present day people throughout, those being Professor Zaroff, Jacko and Sean, the majority of the cast are Atlanteans who have been living in the Lost City for centuries, who might as well be from all those centuries ago, as they are stuck in their old ways. Although this isn't something explored by the serial, they are just like that. Now there are other characters who are potentially from the modern world, notably the scientists who work for Zaroff and even some of the guards who side with him. I'll talk about Zaroff in more detail later once I've finished introducing all the elements of the story, as he plays into a lot of them, as he's the villain after all. So we have a few Atlanteans, with the notable ones being Ramo, Ara, Damon and Faust. Ramo is the most important of these characters, as he's the one who is suspicious of Zaroff, and so joins the side of the quartet. Ara is a servant and joins the quartet to protect her home from Zaroff, as the Doctor shows her kindness when threatened by other Atlanteans. She's very important in the early stages, as she is the one who saves Polly and assists in getting people to meet. Damon is a surgeon who doesn't get along with Zaroff, and is the one who performs the operations that make people into fish people. This surgery gives them artificial gills so they can breathe underwater, a process which Polly nearly undergoes. Then finally there's Faust, who is the leader of the Atlanteans, who sides with Zaroff throughout until his betrayal in one of the most iconic cliffhangers in the show's history.
Nothing in the world can stop me now!
Yes, it's entirely ironic why it is iconic, not because it's shocking or scary, but because it's hilarious. Shame it was redone for the next episode. I'll talk about the fish people now, as despite being the creatures on the cover, they're incredibly minor in the plot, being a horrific idea which Polly nearly becomes, before later going on strike. So the fish people were humans captured by the Atlanteans, who were surgically altered to be able to breathe underwater. Now there are different versions which could suggest further augmentations beyond just the gills that come later as they spend more time underwater, as some seem to be wearing wetsuits and masks while others are fully humanoid fish. The reason for the existence of the fish people is to gather food for the Atlanteans, as the people of Atlantis live off plankton. The existence of this food is what told the Doctor that Professor Zaroff was living in Atlantis, so I'm guessing it's unique in some form. Although this does raise the question of what the Atlanteans had been living off for the centuries before Zaroff arrived. So key fact about this food is that it cannot be stored due to it going off, which is something the Doctor and co use to cause problems in Atlantis by cutting off their supply, which leads to off-screen riots. The way this supply is cut off is by sending Jacko and Sean to bully the fish people before suggesting they go on strike. Now I'll discuss this point further when I get to discussing Jacko and Sean, but this whole thing just raises questions about the fish people, because we are never given a reason why they would serve the Atlanteans and gather their food, since many, if not all of these fish people, are implied to be captured humans. Then surely after being surgically augmented by the Atlanteans by force, they wouldn't exactly be very willing to feed them, and it's clear that they have free will, as once given the idea to go on strike, they just do that. So why exactly have they been working for the Atlanteans? If this means that they are in fact Atlanteans who have willingly undergone this process, then why would they go on strike? And then why would they then try to augment Polly if she clearly wasn't going to work for them? The only line which really goes into this selection process is this.
Some people get most upset when they find they're to have the operation.
Which clearly means this is something forced upon people. So on to Ben and Jamie, who spend a chunk of the serial together as they're both sent to the mines, which is where they meet Jacko and Sean. For the most part Jamie is used well. It doesn't feel like Ben is suffering too much. Although Jamie doesn't have too many strong reactions to the new environment and the whole time travelling thing, settling in very quickly and becoming quite accustomed to everything, he plays a key part in the group's escape in episode 2, and suggesting ideas as to how they should go about their escape, and being very confident for someone who should be out of his element. Ben should basically be babysitting him during this stretch. Oh, and this escape has its own problems with world building, because either the majority of the miners are Atlanteans or they're prisoners who have been captured like Jacko and Sean. So when the group make their escape, why do they do it right in front of a ton of other workers who just sort of go along with it, with them actively covering the secret entrance once they're gone? We don't get to know any of the other miners, so it's not like we know they would do this. If they're prisoners, they would definitely try to escape, which would ruin the group's escape. But if they're Atlanteans, then why are they helping out? Jamie literally thanks them as he's leaving. But something noteworthy about Ben in this serial is that since the dialogue dialogue was rejigged to add Jamie, it means that he has a few lines which make him a lot smarter than in previous serials. Polly isn't as prominent as she was in the Highlanders, being a lot more sideline for the side characters. While she is the one who establishes the time they've landed in, from there she doesn't do a lot, although does get to dress in some Atlantean attire. I don't have much to say about her at all, although I will mention there is one scene in which she hears someone coming and runs away to hide, but doesn't return when it's the Doctor who has entered. In the script she was meant to be sleeping, which would have explained why she didn't reveal herself, but in the televised version, there's no reason. There is also that scene which nobody liked in which Jamie slaps Polly to stop her from having a mental breakdown, which given that these two have just met, somehow makes this even worse, and more than likely would have originally been Ben in the script. On a happier note though, she does wear the Doctor's stovepipe hat in the final scene, which is the last time it's ever seen, ending the Doctor's habit of wearing hats, something which was a running joke for the opening few serials in which the Doctor would wear a new hat in every serial. But this clearly didn't last. And fun fact, we literally have no surviving episodes or clips featuring this hat, so it only survives in images. I haven't spoken much about the Doctor so far, which is because while he's important to the plot, I don't really remember much about him. He feels a lot sillier here, which does fit his characteristic of acting stupid quite well. But then he seems to be a bit too idiotic when talking with Faust about Zaroff being evil. Instead of talking reasonably and explaining in detail about what Zaroff was planning to do, like he did with Ramo, which included a demonstration of what would happen if Zaroff's plan went ahead, the Doctor instead talks about Zaroff's eyes. He asks if Faust has noticed Zaroff's eyes light up when he talks about this plan, before referring to him as being as mad as a hatter, something a person from Atlantis would not understand, as it's a reference to mercury poisoning in hat makers in the 18th and 19th centuries. He does eventually make reference to Zaroff's plan to split the world in half, but by then I think he's basically ruined his case by seeming mad himself.
No answer.
Like I don't even get this bit. This is the weakest moment of this incarnation so far, by quite a mile. This isn't even the only time that the Doctor makes a bad decision in this manner, as later when he, Ben and Jamie are going to Zaroff's laboratory, they leave but have to immediately stop due to a lengthy ceremony, which they are forced to wade through, and once it's over the Doctor realises that they need Ramo as a guide, but by then Zaroff has killed Ramo. So in order for the plot to work, the Doctor had to make this bad decision and forget that he didn't know how to get to Zaroff's laboratory. And it's not even interestingly done, so you end up thinking about it. In fact, why didn't Ramo point this out before they left? Easy fix, Ramos gives them directions, but because of the ceremony they forget the way so have to go back. So now for Jacko and Sean. They're both interesting characters. Jacko is a lot more distrustful and restrained, while Sean is a lot more accepting and has a very strong accent which makes him stand out. I know pointing out an accent making someone distinctive isn't the most critical of dissections, but it's what I remember about him. Sean is definitely the more heavily used, with him being the one who interacts with the fish people, while Jacko attempts to hold him back when he's throwing rocks at them. So I brought the scene up before, as it's bizarre. They want the fish people to go on strike so it will cause chaos in Atlantis, but there is no reason given as to why Sean is throwing rocks at them and insulting them. Like, it seems counterproductive. And it's not like he's doing it to get their attention, as they seem to be listening anyway. They're not the most in-depth of characters, but this harms the character of Sean a lot. So finally we have Zaroff. So like with a lot of the characters, he's not the most in-depth and just seems to be evil because he's gone mad at some point. Why he's gone mad isn't explored at all, but the novelisation connects it with the death of his wife and daughter, which does give us something, and somewhat makes his goal to destroy the Earth make it feel like he wants to unalive himself in a way, which I think adds to the Doctor wanting to save him at the end. It makes Zaroff into quite a tragic character instead of just an insane scientist. It's unfortunate it isn't in the televised version. Zaroff's plan is to destroy the world, under the guise of raising Atlantis. This is by draining the ocean through a crack in the Earth's crust. This will cause the water to become superheated steam, and since it can't escape will cause the planet to explode. It sounds like scientific nonsense, but I don't know. Of course his plan fails when the Doctor tricks him out of his chamber which contains the activation trigger, and the Doctor seals him out, meaning that Atlantis is destroyed but the world is saved, with Zaroff being the one notable death caused by this destruction. But something I do want to point out about this scene is the counter which Zaroff is using is the same clock face used in the second Dalek movie. It still even has the rails label attached. With the destruction of Atlantis, the surviving Atlanteans now have to live on the surface with the rest of humanity, after hundreds of years underground, never to be mentioned again, while Jacko and Sean presumably return to their old lives from before they were captured. That's basically it. There's not much more to say about it, and I don't think there's anything interesting from the behind the scenes. Episode 2 is the earliest surviving Troughton episode. We do have Fraser Hines changing his accent to a more conventional Scottish accent instead of the Highlander accent, and there is that one moment where the Doctor sends a note to Zaroff and it is signed Dr. W, which just adds to my theory that Doctor Who is actually his name. This is the fourth time we've had something like this within such a short time frame. So as I said at the beginning, the Underwater Menace isn't good. It's got plot problems and a villain who is a bit cartoony with a world destruction scheme for no apparent reason. I mean, it mostly looks nice, but if you're not interested then it doesn't matter how good it looks, especially since half of it's missing. But this serial will always have its iconic cliffhanger, so that's something going for it at least. But now, the Doctor has promised the quartet a trip to Mars, but as they take off something happens causing them to fly out of control and head towards danger with an old foe. Next time, the Moon Base.